tonight I'd like to explore the principle or teaching called dependent origination, a teaching of the Buddha. So we're going to kind of do a deep dive into this concept, because it's one of the fundamental teachings of the Buddha. We saw last session that how we suffer because we have a basic misunderstanding concerning reality. We don't see ultimate reality. We only see the conventional reality, the everyday way that things are. And because we don't see kind of the reality that underlies all that, we suffer because we struggle in particular ways. And one of the aspects of the ultimate reality that I was talking about is that everything's interdependent. And it almost sounds simple, right? You kind of see that perhaps in everyday life here and there, but we want to see in our direct experience the depth of that interdependence. It's truly profound in the depth to which everything is interconnected. I think I've said before, if you removed a piece of sand from a beach anywhere, the whole cosmos would just end, right? And it sounds unfathomable to think, to understand that, but it's true, because everything is so interwoven and interdependent that nothing can be taken out of that whole. So I really want to dive into this, and it includes our thoughts and actions are also dependent, arise in dependence on other factors, and you can kind of see this in your meditation practice, right? How everything's just interrelated. You can see how everything that's arising in your moment-to-moment experiences has all these different causes and conditions. If your breath is tight, then it's related to something that's going on in the mind or the heart. You can also see that how stress arises. It's all these dependent on all these factors that come together. So the Buddha taught that everything in the world, including living beings and their experiences, arise dependent on this complex web of causes and conditions. So that's really in a nutshell, what we see in our direct experience. So as I always say, it doesn't help to hear me say it, except in as much as it creates the intention in you to go and see it in your direct experience. Right? It's this talk is a cause and a condition for something to potentially happen. Right? And I'll talk a little bit more, because the depth of that and how it relates to karma is very important. So nothing exists independently. And so the Buddha would say nothing has a self-existence, including us. That's what he means when he says not self. Nothing, not us, not anything, not this cup. Nothing has a self-existence. So because nothing exists interdependently, independently. Everything exists interdependently, and nothing exists independently. Because everything is interdependent, nothing is separate. So there's no separate self. You're not separate. When the Buddha talks about no self, all he's pointing to is seeing that you're interdependent with everything else. That's it. I mean, it's that's the sort of the crux of his teaching. So dependent origination is so important in that. Let's just take an example. Why did you come to this particular session, whether you're in the room in the Shambhala Center there or on Zoom? Can you identify a primary cause that caused you to come to this session? And once you think of that, perhaps it's, I want to be more, I want to be happier in my life, or relieve stress in my life, or I have an aspiration for to know the truth, or awakening, or perhaps a friend told you that you should come, or whatever, just whatever that one. See if you can identify the primary cause of coming. Now look at that primary cause and what caused that to occur. What factors caused that primary factor to occur that brought you here to this session? And then now look at each of those factors. What caused those factors that brought you here? And then look at each of those factors and what caused those factors. And you can see you get kind of this exponential. If you could flow chart it, you'd have this massive, because it just grows, right? Every cause and has a web of factors that cause that, and then each of those has a web of factors that causes that. So ultimately, all you can say with any certainty is that the entire universe or the entire cosmos caused you to be here. If there was the grain of sand was taken off the beach, you wouldn't be here. If any factor anywhere was taken away, you wouldn't be here. So it's innumerable or countless causes brought you here. You can't possibly count them, right? Do you kind of get that? That it's a complex web? That you can never say something caused something. Of course, this has huge implication. I mean, you could say it looks like there's it looks like there's a certain cause, but when you really look below it, there's all these other factors that come to play. So, why bother with understanding dependent origination? Before I go into it, I'll just maybe point out some of those factors. It can lead to greater empathy and compassion for others, because we understand that everything's just happening based on these causes and conditions. It can give us a deeper understanding of the impact of our actions and behavior in the world, because we know that it has a ripple effect into the world, has innumerable ripples, right? The one little thing that you do has all these, puts into play this cascade, like dominoes, of other effects. So it can increase our commitment to ethical behavior, to the teachings of the Buddha in terms of our speech and deeds and action and so on. And it can give us real insight into what causes suffering, that there are causes to suffering, to stress. There are causes, and we can start to see those causes, and we can start to see how, when those causes aren't present, that suffering ceases. And we can also, just one more thing, seeing dependent origination can help us contribute. It can contribute to the falling away of the egoic self. We start to see how the egoic self that struggles with what's unfolding creates suffering. So there's the Buddha outlined 12 links in the process of dependent origination, and I'll go into that a little bit. But I think the key teaching is the complex web of interrelatedness that's so important to understand. But the 12 links begin with ignorance. which can sound like a strong word, but it's simply pointing to our lack of understanding of the nature of reality. Last week, right? It's our lack of understanding of ultimate reality. That's the first link. That's what causes. That's the basis of everything else that unfolds, and why seeing ultimate truth is so important. And from ignorance, we have, actions and intentions. That is the next unfolding, and then the next link is the consciousness and the formation of a self, and then we have, the six senses as part of that self, and of course then we have experiences, what's called contact, where you have the sense base, sense organ, sense experience all come together. Basically, it comprises your life. You have a feeling of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, craving, then clinging, then becoming, aging, and death. And you can kind of look at the way it's been taught is you can look at this birth, as it's called, and becoming is a moment to moment birth. It doesn't have to be looked at as through lifetimes, although it is all also taught in this way. I tend to teach it more in terms of a moment-to-moment experience, how the self gets reborn, the egoic self. Ignorance, you go through those links, and then there's a continuation of the egoic self. So those 12 links really outline how suffering arises and how it can be ended. Because it can be ended by breaking any one of those 12 links. Right? Everything's interconnected, so you can, if you breaking the links at any point can result in freedom, in liberation. And notice, I'll say it again, notice the first link is ignorance, a misunderstanding. You might hear me, I often refer, instead of saying ignorance, which to me it has a kind of tone to it, it's a translation, but I like to call it a innocent misunderstanding. Ignorance is simply an innocent misunderstanding about the true nature of reality. It's innocent in the sense that it's nothing you do. It's just the way it unfolds based on causes and conditions. So all we're doing here in this practice is putting other causes and conditions into play. When you meditate, it's a huge cause and condition. You don't realize how significant it is, perhaps, while you're doing it, but it's putting into your life and into the world a radical shift in the causes and conditions that are at play. Because you're stepping out of egoic struggle into this mode of accepting what is. And that has a huge impact on yourself and others around you in particular, and believe it or not, the world. There is that ripple. It may be slight, but there is that ripple out into the world. I've got some interesting quotes. The Buddha said, "This dependent origination is profound and appears profound. It is through not understanding, not penetrating this, that this generation has become like a tangled ball of string, covered with a blight, as with a blight, tangled like coarse grass, unable to pass beyond states of woe, ruin, and the round of birth and death." Nisargadatta, I've quoted him before. He's an Indian spiritual teacher from the 20th century. known as a non-dual teacher, which is Advaita Vedanta teachings. And he referred to dependent origination in this way. Everything is interlinked, and therefore everything has numberless causes. The entire universe contributes to the least thing. A thing is as it is because the world is as it is. So he's bringing down that level of to the grain of sand, to the cosmos, kind of. The entire universe contributes to the least thing. And one more, Meister Eckhart. Perhaps some of you have heard of Meister Eckhart. He was now considered one of the greatest Christian mystics. At the time, in the late 1200s, early 1300s, he was excommunicated from the church. So for his kind of what were considered radical views on awakening and seeing ultimate truth, he put it this way: all creation is a single unity. It is all in all. Separate yourself from two-ness. Be one in one, one with one from the one. There is no other. He did speak a lot with riddles and kind of lots of those kinds of statements. So I want to talk a bit about, excuse me, karma and karma and dependent origination. And I've really kind of expanded this in terms of my practice in looking at karma. And karma, it's maybe one of the most misunderstood words that, or kama, as it's called in Pali. Karma or kama is one of the most misunderstood words. You hear sayings like karma is a bitch, and that's your karma. If something, a hammer drops on your toe, you go, oh, it's your, we kind of play around with the word in that way, and perhaps it's playful, but it does represent kind of a misunderstanding of the term. The word karma is derived from the Sanskrit word kri, K-R-I, which means to do or to act. So simply, karma refers to the idea that every action or intention of a person has a corresponding effect or consequence. Right? Action, consequence, effect, cause-effect, you could say, is another way to put it. So this means that our present moment experience is the result of past actions, to a degree, of course. And our future circumstances are the result of our present actions. Does that make sense? Just that kind of cause and effect. So often all phenomenon, everything arises in dependence on other factors and conditions, right? And this includes our actions. So like I say, our actions have this ripple effect in the world. They have this effect in the world. And the way the Buddha taught it is karma is closely related to intentions. So it's not just the physical act itself, but the intention behind the act that creates karma. And some people have this, can perhaps be hard to get our brains around. So for example, if you gave money to a homeless person who was asking for money on the street, if you gave that money out of a real sense of compassion and love, that would in the Buddhist teachings have a positive effect, or positive karma. If you gave that money out of a desire for praise or recognition, then that action would be a negative karma. And you have to understand sort of how that intention actually then affects the causes and conditions that we put out into the world. I don't want to say too much about intention, but just to point out that in the Buddha's teachings, the two are very much connected. So the effect of our actions is what the Buddha would call karmic fruits. So and they manifest in the world as karmic fruits. So why is this important, and why am I bringing it up in relation to dependent origination? Well, it's important because it means that things don't unfold in the world in a deterministic way. So you can't say, well, it's just fate, right? If everything's due to causing conditions, then what's the use? Everything's just going to happen. But so karma means that things do not unfold in this kind of deterministic, predetermined way that that would then result in nihilism. We see a way out of conditioned suffering, right? With karma, because when we see the cause of suffering, we can say, oh, I can see that greed, hatred, ignorance cause suffering. And when there's generosity, love, and wisdom, that there's a way out of conditioned suffering. So karma is really what allows us to break that chain of dependent origination. Right? If there wasn't karma, we would just have this predetermined life that you would just kind of hang on, and whatever happens is going to happen. Not much I can do about it. But karma is kind of the way of we can see that there's a way to break that cycle. With wisdom, we can be conscious of our actions. Right? With mindfulness, when we're aware of what we're doing, we can say, oh, this is going to have this effect in the world. And it's going to have this effect on me as well, causing suffering, not just on others. And we can see how we plant the seeds for future moments when we do particular things. And you really, again, like everything else in the Buddhist teaching, you have to see this in your direct experience, how when you do something with that compassionate intention or a loving intention, that it really does have a different impact on yourself. You can know that, right? You can see that. Then if you do it out of a desire for praise or fame or status or something that's more greed-oriented, you can really see that for yourself in your own direct experience. And it has the same effect on the world as well, which you may be able to observe, but it's not as, you don't get the felt sense of it that you do when you look at your direct experience. Yeah. So we can actually trace back and look at an event in our life and trace back the causes and conditions that gave rise to it. See if we trace back its origins. And if you keep looking, like we did with why you came to this session, you see that there's countless. Eventually, you see that there's countless causes for everything that happens. So this I hope you can see how profound this teaching is. I mean, it shows us that when we see phenomenon, so our present moment experience as just nature unfolding, It's phenomenon rolling on because everything's interconnected. We don't struggle with what's in this present moment. Why bother? It's like struggling with the weather. It's just happening. It's nature unfolding. What's here in this moment is nature unfolding. So when we see that, we don't take things personally. We don't struggle with what's happened. We say, okay, this is what's happened. Causes and conditions came together, resulted in this. We're not separate from the world around us. We're interdependent. So everything that happens to us is interdependent on everything else. So you can only take the view that I can control everything that's going to happen to me if I just struggle enough. If you think you're separate from it, right? There's me here and everything else out there that I have to control. I have to control the people around me sometimes, even we go that far. I have to control all these other aspects. And if I just control everything around me enough, I won't suffer. We can see that separateness is an illusion that's created due to an innocent misunderstanding. And again, it's something we see in our direct experience again and again, not something we can read in books. And there's a lot of books on dependent origination. For some reason, the Buddhist scholars they love this. You can go crazy with charts and that conditionality and causation across events, across time, and you get all these. It's almost like math. They get into these complex formulas of how everything. You can, if you like that stuff, it can be a real exercise for the mind. The Buddha. So we see that we're not separate, but we also see that what we do. So the present moment arrives as nature unfolding. But what we do next is a cause and condition. It's karma that we're putting into the world. Do you see that? How that has profound... So you accept what is in the moment, because it can't be any other way. But then you know that what you do in the very next moment has profound implications on what happens to you, to others, and in the world. The karmic ripple effect, the karmic fruits. So if you're reacting, like if it's the ego going, oh, that's not good, I don't like that, I got to get rid of that, I got to try to control this, then it's a constant reactivity. You're often putting negative karmic energy back out into the world. But if it's more of a responding, okay, this is what's happened, how can I now consciously respond from a place of wisdom? And that puts, and in a way that doesn't cause suffering. Yeah. And a way that's not from the egoic self, that self that has that innocent misunderstanding about reality, that ignorance about reality. The Buddha kind of sums this up.